Hi, this is Wikipedia Mobile. Welcome to Unit 3. I'm going to begin this unit by talking a little bit about layouts and constraints, and I'm going to show you a couple of things in Xcode 6 that kind of illustrate the principles behind auto layout, size classes, and constraints. So here we go. Auto layout, first of all, if you have not played with auto layout before, now is the time to do it. Auto layout is a constraint-based system that allows user interfaces to be built and specified according to the relationships between controls. The relationships are called constraints. The relationships are defined in terms of individual controls or groups of controls and their relation to one another. A constraint is simply some measurement, a distance, a size, some other measurement that specifies how each control is going to be displayed, first of all, within itself, the width and height of the control, let's say, and also in relation to other controls and to the screen. Constraint-based layouts and auto layout become very important in Xcode 6, and I'll show you why here in the next slide. But auto layout is enabled by default for all new projects in Xcode 6. If you are used to disabling auto layout because, quote, what you see is what you get, try to get used to using auto layout in Xcode 6 with your new iOS 8 projects, because it really does actually make things much simpler in the long run. So Xcode 6 introduces something called a size class. So what's a size class? A size class allows us to define the screen of an application in terms of some abstract metrics, and these abstract metrics are called compact, any, and regular. So compact roughly kind of indicates a small width or length or height. A medium width and length, according sort of a catch-all width and length for the screen size, would be any. And regular kind of defines a large size. Now these are inadequate terms. We can't really say that compact is small and any is medium, but when we show the demo here in just a second, you'll see, I believe, what I'm talking about. So let's see what these things translate to. Here I have Interface Builder open in a storyboard, and right at the bottom of this thing I see this any, WNE, HNE, width and height any. So let's click on that and see what happens. Here I have any width, and let's go back, any width, any height, and underneath it says for all layouts. So what does this mean? This means it will work with any layout on any device as any width and any height. If we go to compact, it says final values for 3.5, 4-inch, and 4.7-inch iPhones in landscape. So we know what to do with that. And if I kind of go down, this is in iPhones in portrait or landscape, and all iPhones in portrait. So if I look at any compact, I see for all compact height layouts, in other words, iPhones in landscape. And if I look at this, I see 5.5-inch iPhones in landscape. Any would work for any layout, and we'll show you that in a moment in the next little demo. And then regular any would be for all regular width layouts. For example, iPads in portrait or landscape. This one, which would be any regular, would be for all regular height layouts, iPhones in portrait, iPads in portrait or landscape. And then, of course, regular is for iPads in portrait or landscape. The biggest layout we have, the biggest size class we have, is regular. So let's go back and just leave it at any for now. Alright, so along with this idea of auto layout and with size classes comes the idea of constraints. Really, constraints belong to AutoLayout, and we've had them for at least one generation, I believe 2 generations of Xcode. But a constraint is a relationship, as we already said, between 2 controls or 2 groups of controls. Now, constraints become very important with size classes because, as we will see, what you see is not necessarily what you get in design view when you're using size classes. And we'll see that here in a moment. However, if we're looking at a size class based design in Interface Builder, we have an assistant editor, and that assistant editor now has a preview mode, which is very useful in creating user interface designs, as we're going to see in this demo. So again, we have our any type layout here. So let's open the assistant editor and take a look. If we open the assistant editor, by default we're going to get the view controller in this example. But if we click this small button here, the one I'm pointing to now, if we click that and select preview, then I have an option to look at the main storyboard in preview mode. Since we're building explicitly for an iPhone 6 here in this demo, I can see an iPhone 6 interface here, 4-inch iPhone, and then I can rotate that interface to either portrait or landscape mode, and there we have it. So let's go back to portrait mode. Alright, now let's say that I want to build an extremely simple interface. I want to add a button or 2. So I'm going to go over here to the sidebar and grab a button and just, actually let's grab 2 of them. And we'll just grab those out. And we can see that in our preview, they're relatively positioned to one another certainly. But let's say we go ahead and center this in the view here, and we'll see this one scoot over. But of course, it's not centered in the preview mode as it is in our design mode, which makes sense because the preview mode is only taking up about this much of the design mode's width. Alright, let's see what we can do to correct this. We may want to have, in a typical layout, we may want to have a button up here in this corner and a button up here in this corner. And we'll align those horizontally to one another. And we can see that the right-hand button has disappeared off the preview mode screen, which is what we would expect. Now let's apply some constraints to these buttons. One constraint we might wish to apply is that, let's say we're 50 points from the top and 50 points from the left. So we have a pin constraint button down here. Let's go ahead and select that. And then we can select the top and left, turn them red, and then type 50 and 50. And then add 2 constraints. We see these come up as orange. We'll correct this in a minute. But now this button has gone to 50-50. More importantly, let's go over here and do the same thing here. 50 from the top, but this time 50 from the right. So again, we're going to pin and to the top and to the right, 50 and 50, and then apply or add 2 constraints. So now this button all of a sudden has come back in. The width between them, or the distance between them, is affected, but the constraints are only on the top and the right in this case, and the top and the left in this case. Now these are orange, and that says that, well, basically it says that what you are seeing in the design view is not exactly what you're going to see when you run the application. So let's look at these warnings here. Misplaced view, and if we look at the detail, position will be 6870 at runtime, but is 6751 in the canvas now. Well, we got close. But if we look at this third button down here, we have an option to resolve auto layout issues for the selected control. So let's go ahead and do that now. If we say update frames, then the frames here will match the frames in our preview. So let's go ahead and do that. And now these turn blue, everything's okay. And we can do that for the same button, or we can select them and do it for both buttons at once. Notice they haven't moved here. We've updated the frame in the design view to match where it's going to actually end up in the layout. And this is where we want it in the layout, let's say. Okay, so this is constraints, a very simple view of constraints, and how to resolve them. By the way, if we want another control, or let's say that we want this button to be centered both horizontally and vertically. If we do that by the layout guide, this really isn't doing anything at all. And let's get rid of these horizontal and vertical constraints. We can see that that didn't happen. We did it by the layout guide, but the constraints are still saying 50-50, even though they change in the view. So let's just delete these constraints because they're now going to be wrong. And now we can select our button and control drag, aligning to center horizontally in the center, and then control drag again toward one side and center vertically in the container. And now this button is going to be centered not only in our design view, but also in our preview mode, and also when we go to run it on an iPhone 6 or in the simulator. Thank you very much.